let's say China does make a move. We don't sufficiently defer. We don't have sufficient deterrence. So our deterrence is inadequate. China moves quickly. They're 100 miles away, and they make a move to annex Taiwan, put troops quickly on the ground, have air power, naval power to kind of back that up, hoping to keep everyone else at bay. In that scenario, what happens? At that point, what does the U.S., Japan, what does anybody at that point do? Now we failed to deter, and they're moving. What would realistic options be?
Well, the interesting thought is along the lines of what you suggested earlier. If Taiwan had, say, enough heavy armor on the ground or some Abrams tanks to slow down any kind of beachhead assault or arrival, and U.S. Navy officials had early warning of a possible attack, they could be in position to thwart, challenge, or essentially preclude any successful takeover. If there was, as you suggest, a possible takeover, that raises a fascinating and interesting question. If you look at a website like globalfirepower.com, they list the number of available troops that the U.S. has in the Pacific, as well as all the different allies in the region. And it was fascinating to learn that South Korea has its 2 to 3 million reserve soldiers, likely for the DMZ to stop a potential North Korean invasion. Japan has as many as 1 million potentially available soldiers. Australia much less, more like 60,000. But the idea of getting a land force assembled and having the air superiority to then have an amphibious response counterattack would be extremely challenging. China has as many as 2 million active duty soldiers. So if they had boots on the ground there, any kind of assault would likely start with long-range ballistic missiles. If they're 100 miles from coast, they could easily target a bunch of areas in Taiwan. Taiwan has fixed air defense sites around the perimeter, and it's likely to be followed by an air-sea kind of amphibious attack if they could establish air superiority, which I think is a very tall order given the presence of U.S. fifth-generation jets, if they can get there fast enough. And when it comes to dislodging a potential land force, that's an incredible question, because you talk about things like heavy armor, they are very hard to deploy. Remember the Gulf War, the months of staging. You have to get heavy assets in position to be deployed. Which is why you see this big push on the part of the Army to be more expeditionary, airdropped vehicles, airdropped light tanks, for example, expeditionary combat vehicles. So the hope would be to use long-range sensors, long-range weapons. Of course, you use those to soften the defenses on the perimeter and see if you can somehow get on the beach. And if you can land on Taiwan, then maybe you can create a corridor for all of those millions of Japanese, South Korean, and U.S. troops to get there.